What's your favorite unintended video game mechanic? How about an automatic missile system in a spaceflight simulator, or a functioning virtual computer built in a platformer's creation engine? How about a stupidly tall tower stretched into the sky in a battle royale game? Heck, this could even manifest as a speedrunner glitching their way through a game. These are all examples of something called emergent gameplay. Gameplay that arises from the mechanics and systems of a game being used in unique ways the developers never directly intended. It's what makes a lot of the most successful games of all time, like Minecraft and Terraria, so much fun. For the past few weeks, my friends and I have been working on a new game, centered entirely around this emergent gameplay concept. The game is based on an emergent magic system, and we've decided to document the entire development process, from start, hopefully all the way through to finish. Anyway, without further ado, let's jump straight into emergent gameplay. Before we can learn how to make good emergent gameplay, or talk about what that looks like in our very early prototypes, or even what that'll look like a little ways down the line, we have to know why developers structure emergent gameplay the way they do. And to do that, we have to find out what makes it fun. Now, before we do that, click disclaimer, I am not an experienced game dev. I obviously have a little experience, or I wouldn't be making a game, but my main qualifications to talk about how to make good games is my experience as a gamer. You have been warned. If you want to watch experienced devs, well, there's plenty of them on YouTube. But I am not going to lie to you and tell you I am one of them. Anyway, moving right along, unfortunately, there isn't an easy answer to the question of what makes emergent gameplay fun. Ask your friends or the internet or whatever, and you're going to get a wealth of different answers. This is partially because there isn't a consistent definition of emergent gameplay. As I alluded to in the intro, pretty much any unintended game mechanic counts as emergent gameplay. The Wikipedia article on emergent gameplay, which, by the way, is painfully short for such a critical part of modern gaming, if you're a Wikipedia editor, please go and update it, actually divides emergent gameplay into two categories: intentional emergence and unintentional emergence. Both are pretty much exactly what it says on the tin, with intentional emergence being any emergent gameplay that was intended, basically anything that doesn't involve glitches and exploits. On the other hand, unintentional emergence is when emergence is generated from glitches and exploits. Intentional emergence is using a hammer to pound nails, and unintentional emergence is using it to chop trees. For the purposes of this discussion, we will be focusing on intentional emergence, and I will tell you when I'm referring to unintentional emergence, which will probably be never. Anyway, back to the question at hand. What makes emergent gameplay fun? For most people, I think it is either the freedom to make whatever you want and do it your way, or the joy of watching your creation break in a funny way or work incredibly well beyond your wildest dreams. Please note the following speculation based on the narrator's own personal experiences. The narrator has no formal psychology education and has done about 5 minutes of research, if that. Both of the things that make emergent gameplay fun, the freedom and creativity it gives players, I think they scratch fundamental itches in the human condition. Humans like freedom, and we like to create. In my own personal experience, the reason I love game development, the reason I love engineering, and the reason I love emergent gameplay is because I get to combine them in clever ways to make things that are beautiful and that others can enjoy. And I think, in the end, making fun emergent gameplay comes down to letting the player make cool, interesting things that they can watch and look at and say, I did that. It's awesome. Now that we've established that I am not a psychologist and yet still have strong feelings on what makes fun emergent gameplay, and now that we've established what those strong feelings are, let's get into how to implement what we learned in the last segment. A lot of the best emergent gameplay systems have a long but shallow learning curve, and still let you do cool things even at the start of the learning curve. Take Minecraft Redstone. Any idiot can make a simple door, but a bit more, and now you can make a better door, but even more, and now you can cram into a 7x7x9 room a lamp that drops down from the ceiling and make it toggleable with a button. It's not easy to learn Minecraft Redstone. It takes some getting used to, but once you're good at it, things you make are incredible. Even when you're not, you can still make fun stuff. As the last example showed, building a good emergent gameplay system requires balancing two things. You need to make it big and complicated enough that there's a lot to do, and, hardcore players can have fun. You also need to make sure that the basics are easy enough to use that even a casual player can have some fun too. Some of these things can be made up for with good game design. For instance, in the game Nova Drift, they use a modifier system that makes it really easy to make big, complicated, cool things. But even if you mess this balance up, don't sweat it. It's not the end-all, be-all of making good emergent gameplay. It helps a lot, but there are plenty of good emergent gameplay games that don't get it right. As an example, take Kerbal Space Program. At the time of this writing, it's sold over 5 million copies. It is a masterwork of emergent gameplay, and yet it has an extremely steep learning curve. I mean, it's literally rocket science, and while it has good tutorials, it's still so hard for new players to get into it that the sequel made a major priority of better onboarding for new players. I think it was literally one of like 5 major promises they made. Despite this, as I said, it has sold literally over 5 million copies and keeps a very large active fan base. Another game that pulled the same thing is Space Engineers. It's exactly what it sounds like, designing stuff from a menu of parts. Think Minecraft in space, with more of an emphasis on weapons and vehicles instead of houses. What sets these games apart, and what lets them ignore a huge segment of their player base? Well, long story short, it's not that they just show off a cool concept and then run away with the money. Both, as I said earlier, have vibrant online communities. At the time of this writing, there were 6,938 players actively playing Space Engineers through Steam. KSP had 2,233. And let's not forget, both these games are on Xbox and PlayStation, and both games also sell directly from their own website, so the player numbers are significantly lower than the actual number of people currently playing the game. These games manage to hook and keep players for a long time. I think it boils down to the same reason people get hooked by games with shallow learning curves. You can still build cool stuff and you can still have fun with it, it's harder, so casual people don't stay as long. In short, when you learn a system and use it to do something cool, that feels good. Be it pride or satisfaction or a mix of both or something else entirely. With emergent gameplay systems, it's even better. You get more of a sense of pride or satisfaction or whatever when you've created something new versus just done something badass. The experience of what you're making something new, of doing something cool and crazy in a novel way, that makes it even better. This is what I meant earlier when I talked about how humans like creating with no bounds. Long story short, good emergent gameplay is about achieving balance between complexity and creativity, simplicity and ease of use. If you don't quite strike this balance, don't despair, just make sure that you place the intersection between complexity and creativity purposefully. Remember, the goal is to let the player create. If the player can create, good, you've achieved your goal, you've made good emergent gameplay. If they can create easily, then you've made great emergent gameplay. As I said in the intro, me and several friends have set out to create a game based on emergent gameplay, and for better or for worse, the emergent gameplay aspects have fallen on my shoulders. Now, I may or may not have been the one to put them there, but that's not important. The goal for the emergent magic system I've been building is twofold. First, obviously let the player customize their magic. I want you to be able to take some basic building blocks and make interesting spells. I also want every spell to act at least a little differently. The second is fast-paced combat. I want you to be slinging spells non-stop and never having to slow down. Not quite as fast-paced as, say, Street Fighter, but fast. Now, you might have noticed those two are kind of in conflict. There's a reason you don't see a lot of emergent gameplay in games such as The Elder Scrolls. Oh, sure, there's some when you're, like, picking level-up perks and stuff, but there's not much. So, yeah, this took a lot of ideas and idea revision, total scrapping of ideas. My initial idea, 6-7 months ago, when I first started concepting this game, was based on the observation that in a lot of fantasy books and short stories, they often describe using magic as weaving. You weave the aether, or the ley lines, or other old words that sound mystical. I also noticed that the source of magic spells is almost never talked about or explained in video games, and I realized I couldn't think of any game based on the concept of weaving magic. So I looked into it, and none existed as far as I could tell. I knew an opportunity when I saw one, and decided to start properly concepting a game around weaving magic. The initial concept was very literal. It would be a top-down dungeon crawler like the older Zelda games. In each room there would be some enemies, and rather than fight them with swords or bombs or whatever, you would be able to hit a key to reveal the ley lines that would suffuse every room. This would show a bunch of lines of magic crisscrossing the room. You would click and drag sections of the ley lines so they overlapped with other sections. You could drag a few ley lines together so they overlapped in the same or different places, and then you'd hit a key to let loose the spell and see what happened. This is a really cool concept that had a couple of fatal flaws. One, it could be potentially really slow, and while this wasn't a deal breaker for me at the time, it was annoying, because I did know I wanted fast-paced combat, I didn't know just how fast I wanted. The second flaw is it would be difficult and time-consuming to code, and even more so to polish. In the end, this was the main deal-breaker for me. Another variant on the concept was one where only the ends of ley lines would be visible in Dragon. Then, when you wanted to cast a spell, you'd take the ley lines and attach them to objects in the room to cause various effects. The next major iteration was the realization that at that point I should just ditch ley lines and just have little pockets of magical energies sitting around the rooms that you can use to affect objects. Eventually, I decided to take this concept 3D, with you being able to find these pockets in rooms and use them for puzzle solving or combat. At this point, I was running some of these concepts by my team, and they were helping me refine them. I played around with the idea of letting you just spawn the modifiers, then letting you spawn modifiers and objects. We realized this would be too slow for combat, spent a bit more time playing with other variations on this concept trying to make it work. We even considered giving you time powers at some point, but we eventually realized the concept was completely unworkable with combat. So instead of resigning ourselves to a puzzle game, we made a better system. So without further ado, allow me to present to you the design for our magic system. This system will still be based on components, however you will assemble spells beforehand, thus allowing you to move quickly and engage in combat without having to pause for 2 minutes in between each attack. This isn't Elder Scrolls, wizards are actually powerful in this game. Each spell is made up of 2 parts, the base spell and the modifier stack. The base spell determines damage type, speed, and any other stats we need, like damage or cooldown. The modifier stack is what gives the player the ability to create. Within the modifier stack, you have a number of modifier slots, currently 4, but ideally it would expand throughout the game. The slots are numbered 1 through however many slots you have, and each slot you put any modifier you want, excluding a few specific ones that might end up needing specific conditions to be placed, such as needing to be the first modifier. The modifiers trigger in order, so the modifier in slot 2 can't trigger until the modifier in slot 1 triggers. Different modifiers will trigger under different conditions, so for instance, you might have modifiers that trigger the second they can, or others that trigger only on contact with an enemy, or only on contact with a surface, or whatever. Different modifiers might have different effects on the spells. For instance, the 2 modifiers we have implemented right now split the spell into 2 and bounce off surface respectively. Essentially, it would be block coding for spells. Anyway, thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Just trying to grow the channel, blah blah blah. Typical annoying YouTuber stuff people say because it boosts engagement. If you have ideas, like the concept, or just think it's stupid and want to let us know we're wasting our time because you're kind like that, feel free to leave a comment. I left them on for a reason. I don't have anything else to plug or anything else to say other than I want to upload more of these at some point. Bye!